So actually, PDF changed my life. It really did. I was first on this stage 3 years ago in 2011, right after coming back out of government. I came out of government in January. And I spent a couple months back in academic political science and public policy. And then I came here, and I was completely electrified. I really thought, this is the community I want to be part of. It was so optimistic. It was so energized. It was so full of possibility. And there's a straight line that I won't go through right now between that moment and my decision in September to leave Princeton and to become the CEO and president of New America. We're Dropping Foundation. So 3 years ago when I was here, what electrified me was just the emphasis on technology and what technology could do. 3 years later, I come away, yes, technology, but much more of a focus on policy and specifically on people. What we heard yesterday from Zeynep and Katie about psychology and micro-affirmations and micro-oppressions, and also the need to do the boring work, the work that isn't really about technology. I come away thinking this time we need to be focused on technology, policy, and people. And what I want to do is talk about 5 ideas for a new America that will connect all of those things, will connect social and economic reform to political reform, technology, and hopefully leave you with a more optimistic view of the country. So I'm going to be shameless with my first, well, let me try that again. There we go. I'm going to be shameless on my first slide. This is a teaser for the book that is coming, that I hope will be coming out early next year. The first idea is to make the next phase of the women's movement a men's movement. I really believe we've gotten about as... I mean, we're still advancing with the way we're framing it now, but very slowly, and we're not making nearly enough progress. I did not pick this quote because Microsoft is the presenting sponsor of this conference. I actually use this quote all the time. But Bill Gates said at Davos about 5 years ago, the 2 great forces of human nature, not male or female nature, but of nature, are self-interest and caring for others. I think we have to think, instead of a woman's movement and work and family, which is code for women, we have to start talking about care and competition, the caring side of us, of all of us, and the competition side of all of us, and how we get that balance. So when we do that, we realize that we're offering our daughters more choices than our sons. Those of us who are raising daughters typically tell them you can be a caregiver and a breadwinner, and it's fabulous when you can do both, and you may need to do that together or sequentially. However, we're raising our sons still basically to be defined by their careers. Your worth as a man is a function of how well you do in the competitive sphere, of how much you earn, of how well you succeed. That is not fair to men. And it's certainly never going to work for women unless we can have much greater balance on both sides. So I want to put to you that right now, the sharing and the caring side of many men in this community is going into open source. That's great, but let's bring it into the family too. So, all right. So the way we're going to do this, in part, is to end the office. So in this crowd, I don't think that's really a very hard proposition. You all know, I mean, look at all of you. You're at work wherever your laptop is. You know that the office is not where work gets done. The office is where some kinds of work that require face-to-face interaction can get done, and often efficiently. I'm not talking about abandoning any idea where we go, but it's certainly not the office as the place where we expect to do work. What you may not realize is that's great for millennials. You know that. That's great for parents. It's actually essential for parents or caregivers of any kind, whether you're taking care of your own parents or family members, whoever. But it's equally important, whoops, let me go back there. It's equally important for retiring baby boomers. We have, right now, there are 67% of baby boomers who are over 65 and older are working. That is almost double what it was 10 years ago. As baby boomers retire, they're not going to retire. They can't afford to retire. They're going to keep working, but they're going to want to work much more flexibly. So the millennials, the caregivers, and older people are going to be make sure we actually do get rid of the end of the office, and that is going to make it a whole lot easier for us to have the kind of flexible careers we need. What's going to go along with that is a revolution in education. This is already taking place, and I'm now talking about higher education. Higher education is going to become lifelong from multiple sources with measurable outcomes. So when you think about that, the key to that is actually changing how we measure education. And right now, we measure it in terms of the credit hour. We measure it in terms of how many hours you sit there, rather than how much you've actually learned. So if you think about it, credits were actually adopted to help faculty members get paid the same for pension contributions. That was the original sort of the origins of the credit hour. It is now the basis for how do you get a degree. Although if you notice, colleges don't honor each other's credits. So it means they clearly don't have faith that you're learning what you're supposed to be learning. So cracking the credit hour, getting rid of it, is what will actually allow us to get to where we're going. And this is a perfect blend of technology, but with economics and with the human side, which is virtual platforms that allow you to learn from multiple sources to get credentialed. We heard earlier today about WorkHands. That was a perfect example of where if you learn on the job, experiential learning, or online learning, adaptive learning, you can get credentialed in ways that will allow you to have multiple careers or to learn what you need to know in your career. So a men's movement, ending the office, which will enable that, changing education. I've only got 12 minutes for 5 ideas, so. So let me then move to the way that's going to fit into a very different economy. Okay, so first place, and some of this will be very familiar to many of you, the future of manufacturing is services, and the future of ownership is renting. So look at the iPhone. Is that a good or a service? It's obviously both. That's obvious when it's the iPhone. It may be a little less obvious when it's a tractor. But the tractor's the same thing. The tractor is now a housing for a complex agricultural computer, which can do seeds and water and the type of soil you've got and the type of the season it is, but is equally a housing for a telematics system that John Deere sells when it sells its tractors, right? So that's the Internet of Things. I don't have to explain that to all of you. But the point is that what you're selling is a source of information that then requires a whole set of human beings to actually man that telematics system. It can't be done completely by computer. And effectively, you're seeing this very ugly word, the servitization of manufacturing. Here, and particularly in light of what I've heard for the last 2 days, I think the way we need to think about this in terms of goods and services collapsing, but also the sharing. Most people don't think when we talk about the sharing economy, this is an aircraft engine, the sharing or the renting of things we formerly owned. So some aircraft manufacturers are now actually renting their engines in a power-by-the-hour system. That's what it's called, where it's the manufacturer still owns it, the airline rents it. What does that do? That aligns the incentives to keep it working all the time, right? Preventive maintenance to make sure, because the manufacturer only gets paid to the extent it's working, which is obviously what the airline wants. So we think of the sharing economy in all sorts of wonderful and very often feel-good ways. If you go out to the wider economy, I think we need to be talking about the sharing economy, meaning the sharing of information and the sharing of goods for profit. Now, the question for this crowd, as we just heard wonderfully, is whether the sharing economy also becomes a sharing community. In Airbnb, from what we just heard, that can happen. That can happen in wonderful ways. But even when it doesn't, we're moving toward the sharing economy. Okay, last thing to talk about, because this is PDF, is the change coming on the political side. So make everyone a political donor is not a new idea on this stage. I heard Larry Lessig give it. You've read about it from Larry Lessig. You've read about it from Bruce Ackerman. The basic point, obviously, is that the currency of democracy is no longer votes, it's dollars. And that if we make everyone a donor, we can teach them how to spend those dollars effectively in the market for power. So how do we do that? Lessig has vouchers. The other systems are tax credits. In Minnesota, there's actually the Minnesota Political Contribution Fund, where you get a refund the minute you donate $50. And that's working. In Minnesota, donations of $100 or less are 45% of all donations. So this is working now, and we can make it work a whole lot better state by state. But that's just the start. And this is where I want to end. Absolutely, returning power to voters by giving them money and by allowing them to, then creating the incentives for politicians to seek out their votes, that's very important. But to maximize that power, if you think about it as teaching them how to spend effectively in a market for power, to teach them how to do that, they've got to come back together. It can't just be individual votes. It means they have to come back together in what I believe Adam Greenwald called sensitively augmented political assemblies. They need to come together. They need to reform political communities. They need to use Lumio to turn that lovely deliberation. I tweeted yesterday that anybody who wants only deliberative democracy without moving it toward action has not sat through as many faculty meetings as I have. What we want, right, is we do want political community. We want to move that forward to action, and that then rebuilds the real foundations of democracy, which are not just the vote, not just the dollars, but that sense of political empowerment. That is ultimately an example of where we use the technology to allow voters to get the policy that will allow them to flourish and grow as human beings. That's PDF. Thank you very much.